So I think one of the things about the media co-op that is the most important is that when you consider especially the landscape in New Brunswick where 80% of the media publications are owned by one company, the Brunswick News. And that's not to say there is necessarily an insidious agenda behind that. However, there is a problem when media becomes consolidated that there's a bias that becomes inherent in the stories, whether it's intentional or not. And so, especially in New Brunswick, I think it's important to have the media co-op in order to tell those stories that the 80% press would not normally be interested in and hence would otherwise kind of be smothered or put out of public light.
The particular problem in New Brunswick and what makes it a real problem is also the Irving Group is also the largest private sector employer and the largest employer involved in resource extraction in some very contentious issues, especially all over the province, but in the rural province. So what you have is the media monopoly reporting on the biggest issues that really do affect the province. And there's all kinds of opportunities for conflict of interest there.
So independent journalism, alternative independent journalism provides a more grassroots democratic platform for other voices to be heard, other stories, especially stories that might provide important criticism of mainstream opinions.
I think, not only informing people of stuff that isn't getting coverage in the other sources, but I think it also, to some extent, holds the other outlets to account for not covering certain stories or for calling out these other sources if there's problems or issues in how they're reporting on certain stories.
Really about that, free and independent media, free of that top-down control mechanisms, and really putting media, putting knowledge, awareness, social awareness, economic, political awareness in the hands of citizens, of volunteers and citizens. And it's very easy to be shut out if you are critical, or if you're bringing the grassroots perspective and you're asking questions on big things about how does it impact the earth, how does it impact water. Those bigger issues are important to me, but when you bring them to a corporate-minded mentality, then a lot of times those get swept under the rug. So having that independent media it's awesome as a citizen to know that if there's information I wanted to get out there, that it's not going to be censored. I mean, the NB Media Co-op will do its due diligence to make sure that the story has is validated, it has some elements of truth to it, but it's definitely your words.
I think it's really important to have a diversity of perspectives in media. We all come from different places and different experiences. What I learned through some of my colleagues is that, through the NB Media Co-op, is that, we all have biases, and the biases manifest themselves in media organizations. So rather than just pretending that they don't exist, we actually admit it exists.
It's an amazing community resource, and I wish that the community we live in now had one. And I think that every community would benefit from the complete package of product that is the media co-op, with the website, the brief, the paper, and all the content and all the issues that are being brought to light.
A group of us back in 2008 held a New Brunswick Social Forum. We had social work students that were part of organizing it with us, and we were all members of different groups like the Fredericton Peace Coalition, members of unions. So we all got together and organized a New Brunswick Social Forum, and 200 people from across the province came to that to hear different people talking about all sorts of different issues, and we all recognized that the media was a common problem, so we formed a working group out of that social forum, and we talked about doing different things like taking on the media monopoly in the province, generating our own media, and so that's how the NB Media Co-op was born, was out of that New Brunswick Social Forum, and it's kept going, and so we're a decade old this year.
So we did, in the beginning, it was just like we were doing everything and trying to get as many people involved as possible.
Yeah, and I remember, we organized probably a day-long session where we did a lot of planning with interested members of the community. And then we were planning to launch, choosing a website. And I know I wrote some articles.
It just seems much more of an institution now, and a lot of people know about it, and it just seems to grow each year in terms of uh, it being recognized and considered a legitimate and important news source in the province. I think in the early days, it was sort of touch and go as to whether it would last, but I think 10 years is quite extraordinary. And I think that's no small feat in the province of New Brunswick to have an independent um, co-op media organization that's supported by, working class folks and trade unions and individuals and students uh, going forward. I think it's very good for the province of New Brunswick to have the MB Media Co-op.
One of the things with the MB Media Co-op is the personalities that have contributed to it, and sometimes in very understated ways. So Tracy Glynn in particular has exercised a huge amount of leadership in this province, and I think it is easy to not recognize that the strength that she brings to public issues, because she is a very kind of understated person in the way that she goes about her business. But there really would be no NB Media Co-op, I don't think, over these last 10 years or 11 years now, if it weren't for her. So she's really, I think, been the driving force behind it, and has had a really, an important effect on how the organization is organized. So it's very horizontally organized, and also on its intellectual vision.
We look for things like, just grammar editing, but also that the facts are correct. And we also help writers who may have less experience than we do with writing and how to craft a good story and make suggestions for changes.
The Media Co-op feels that it's important to do collaborative editing with our writers, so we're also fostering a new generation of storytellers too, which is important.
For me, when I think of the NB Media Co-op, especially that it's a cooperative, especially that it's like non-corporate, it has a very organic, grassroots structure to it.
I think one of the most important things about the Media Co-op is that it's a collective and it's all volunteer driven. We have had interns in the past from various programs, because we are based in Fredericton and we have 2 universities in Fredericton, so there's a lot of internship opportunities that come up. But otherwise everything else is driven by volunteers, and that means the fundraising to circulate our paper brief, all of the editorial work, all of our computer work, and the online presence. Everything is done by volunteers. So it's a bit of a labor of love by a very dedicated group of people.
When I first got to know Tracy Glynn, and she comes out and says there's bias everywhere, and I thought she said it really great when she said, yes, there is bias in the media, and we are for a clean earth, we are for a healthy population, we are for treaty rights, we are for women's rights, we are for educational rights. So if you like those kind of values, and you might like our writing or what we have to offer. So for me, I really come at it that from like a social justice area, that it's without that alternate voice, or without that other voice to combat so many other, then what are you left with?